Hello there, and welcome to the Drift to the Stars. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Whatever the day brought you, its noise, its weight, its unfinished edges, you can set it down now. This is a quiet place, and there's nothing here that needs your urgency. Only curiosity, soft and unhurried, the kind that asks questions without needing answers before sleep. Tonight we're going to wander gently through the natural world together, not rushing through it, not cataloguing it, just resting inside it, the way you might sit at the edge of a forest and simply let it be around you. Some of what you hear tonight may stay with you. Some may dissolve before morning. Either way is fine. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. Somewhere beneath you, right now, there is a world you have never seen, not far just beneath the surface of the ground, under the grass, under the pavement, under wherever you happen to be lying or sitting as you listen to this. A single teaspoon of healthy soil, less than you could hold in the curve of a fingertip, contains more living organisms than there are human beings on this entire planet. Billions of bacteria, thousands of fungi, nematodes threading through mineral grains like rivers through canyons, protozoa drifting in films of water thinner than a hair. They have no idea you exist. They are simply working, breaking down what has fallen, returning it to what can grow, maintaining a web of chemistry so intricate that we have named only a fraction of the species within it. You are resting on top of a city more populated than anything humanity has ever built. And it is quiet. And it has always been there. That city beneath the soil does not work alone. In forests, in almost any forest, anywhere on Earth, the roots of trees reach outward through the dark and meet something waiting for them. Fungi. Thin threads called mycelium, finer than spider silk, that weave through the soil and attach to the root tips of trees, sometimes dozens of different species at once. Through these connections, older trees, the ones with deep roots and wide canopies, the ones that have been here long enough to know the rhythm of this particular patch of earth, send sugars downward and outward to younger trees growing in shade, saplings that could not yet make enough light to feed themselves. They are not doing it consciously, as far as we know. And yet, a forest is not a collection of individual trees competing for light and water. It is something closer to a community, threaded together underground, sharing what it has with what needs it. The oldest trees giving quietly to the youngest, through channels we could not see until recently, in a language made entirely of chemistry. Part of what makes a forest feel the way it does, that particular easing that happens in your chest when you walk into trees, is not imaginary, and it is not merely the absence of noise. Trees release compounds into the air, phytoncides. They are called chemical signals the trees use to protect themselves from bacteria and insects. But when you breathe them in, something shifts. Your cortisol levels drop. Your natural killer cells, the ones your immune system uses to fight illness, become more active. Your blood pressure falls toward calm. You are, in a measurable and documented way, being changed by the air a forest breathes out. In Japan, this practice has a name: Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing. Not hiking, not exercise, simply being present inside the trees, breathing what they offer. Doctors there have begun prescribing it. Studies have tracked the changes. The forest, it seems, has been offering this quietly for as long as forests have existed, long before anyone thought to measure it. And the forest does not only offer its chemistry. After rain falls on dry earth, a particular scent rises, something you may have known your whole life without ever having a name for. It is called petrichor, and it comes partly from a compound released by soil bacteria called geosmin, and partly from plant oils that settle into dry ground and lift into the air with the first drops of water. Human beings can detect geosmin at concentrations of 5 parts per trillion. 5 parts per trillion. That is how exquisitely attuned your nose is to the smell of rain on Earth. More sensitive to that particular scent than a shark is to blood in water. No one is entirely certain why we evolved such precise sensitivity to it. One possibility, gentle and unverified, and worth holding lightly, is that for most of human history, rain meant survival. That the smell of water finding dry ground was, for a very long time, the smell of relief. You may have inherited that feeling. It may be older than memory. There is another gift the living world offers to your nervous system, and it arrives so quietly you may never have noticed it arriving. Birdsong. Researchers studying human stress responses have found that listening to birdsong, natural, unstructured, the kind that drifts through a window or rises from a hedgerow, can shift the nervous system from a state of threat into a state of rest within minutes. Not because of any particular melody, not because it is beautiful, though it often is, but because, for most of human evolutionary history, birdsong meant something specific. It meant the environment was safe. Birds go quiet when predators are near. When you hear birds singing freely, some ancient and wordless part of you registers. Nothing dangerous is close. You can soften. You can lower the guard you may not have known you were keeping. Right now, somewhere outside, wherever you are, birds are sleeping in the same darkness you are moving toward. And in a few hours, before the light arrives, one of them will begin. Beneath the forest, beneath the roots and the mycelium and the soil cities, the conversation does not stop. The fungal network connecting trees is not passive. Chemical signals move through it, and they move with purpose. When one tree is attacked by insects, it releases compounds into the network. Neighboring trees receive the signal and begin producing their own defensive chemicals before the insects reach them. The warning travels faster than the threat. Scientists call it the Wood Wide Web, which is a name made for headlines. But underneath the slight whimsy of it is something genuinely difficult to hold in the mind. A forest is not just sharing nutrients, it is sharing information. It is, in some functional sense, paying attention. No single tree decides this. There is no center, no mind, no intention we can point to. And yet, the behavior that results this distributed, patient, chemical awareness looks, from the outside, remarkably like care. Some of the trees holding this network together have been doing so for a very long time. In the high, cold, wind-scraped mountains of the American West, there are bristlecone pines growing today that were already ancient when the pyramids at Giza were under construction. Not the species, the individual trees. The same rooted, twisted, silver-barked trunks. Still making needles. Still sending sugars down into the soil. Still participating in whatever slow conversation the mountain carries on with itself. One tree in particular, in the White Mountains of California, is estimated to be just over 5,000 years old. When that tree was a seedling, human writing did not exist. The wheel had just been invented. The Bronze Age had not yet begun. It has endured drought and ice and fire and centuries of wind. It has let parts of itself die in hard years and grown again in better ones, and it is still there, still patient, still, in its slow way, alive. There is something steadying about that, something that makes your own particular night feel very small and very safe, within the long patience of things. The trees are not the only ones paying attention to danger through invisible signals. Grasses do it too quietly, constantly, in the fields and meadows and plains that cover much of the Earth's land surface. When an insect grazes on a blade of grass, the grass releases airborne chemicals within minutes, not into the soil, into the air. Neighboring grass plants detect these compounds and begin producing their own defensive substances, making their leaves tougher, more bitter, less inviting. The signal travels downwind across a meadow faster than any insect could walk. You can stand in a summer field and hear nothing but the wind and occasional bird song, and all around you, at a scale and in a language far below your perception, the grass is talking, quietly warning, quietly listening, quietly preparing. The stillness of a meadow is not the absence of activity. It is activity so finely tuned, so perfectly scaled to itself, that it asks nothing of you to continue. It was doing this before you arrived. It will do it long after you have gone. Above all of this, above the soil cities, the mycelium threads, the whispering grasses and the ancient pines, the sky holds something that seems impossible until you do the mathematics. A single ordinary cumulus cloud, the kind that drifts white and soft above a summer afternoon, the kind that looks like it weighs nothing at all, can hold up to 500,000 kilograms of water. 500,000 kilograms, floating. It floats because the water is not gathered in one place, but suspended as droplets so fine, they are held aloft by the slow, upward movement of warm air. The cloud is not a thing so much as a process, a continuous balancing act between the weight of water and the rise of warmth. When you watch a cloud cross the sky, you are watching something massive held up by something gentle. It is a good image to carry toward sleep. And if you lift your eyes past the clouds, past the atmosphere, into the dark beyond, the light reaching your eyes from the stars tonight did not leave those stars tonight. The nearest star beyond our sun sent its light 4 years ago. The stars of the Orion constellation sent theirs somewhere between 250 and 1,300 years ago. Some of the faint lights visible to the naked eye on a clear night carry light that left its source before your country existed, before your language existed. You are not looking at the stars as they are. You are looking at the stars as they were a gallery of moments, each one from a different depth of time, all arriving at your eye simultaneously. The night sky is not a single moment. It is thousands of different pasts, layered, silent, traveling toward you across distances that dissolve the word far into something that no longer means what it used to mean. And somewhere among them, light is leaving stars right now that will not reach this planet for 1,000 years. Someone or something will stand beneath a night sky and receive it, not knowing it began its journey while you were here, breathing quietly, letting the day go. That light traveling toward a future we will never see began its journey through something we rarely think about: the nature of ice. In Greenland and Antarctica, glaciers have been slowly accumulating for hundreds of thousands of years, layer by layer, each snowfall pressing down on the last, compressing into ice that grows denser and more ancient with depth. And trapped within that ice, sealed inside tiny bubbles no larger than a pinhead, is air. Actual air. The atmosphere of 800,000 years ago, preserved perfectly in cold and darkness, waiting. Scientists drill down into that ice and extract these bubbles carefully. And what they find inside is the breath of a world that existed before our species did. The exact composition of an atmosphere that dinosaurs never knew, that early mammals breathed, that blew across landscapes now buried under kilometers of frozen water. To hold a piece of that ice would be to hold a moment so distant it has no name in any human calendar. It simply waited, quietly, in the cold, keeping its record intact, asking nothing in return. Ice holds time, and water, in its other moods, holds something else entirely. Right now, on every coastline on Earth, simultaneously, the ocean is moving, not from wind, not from storm, from the moon. The same moon hanging outside your window tonight is pulling at the water of every sea and ocean on the planet, raising it slightly on the side facing the moon, drawing it into a slow, perpetual bulge that travels around the Earth as the planet rotates beneath it. Tides are not something that happens to the ocean. Tides are the ocean responding always, faithfully, without a single exception in the billions of years since the moon formed to the gravitational presence of something 384,000 kilometers away. Every beach, every tidal flat, every mangrove root that lifts out of the water twice a day and submerges again twice a day is moving in rhythm with that pull. You have stood at the edge of the sea and felt it was vast and untamed, and it is. And simultaneously, it is obedient, tuned to the moon, the way a stringed instrument is tuned to the hands that made it, vibrating in faithful response. The moon does not only move oceans, trees, it seems, move too in their own way, at their own pace, in a rhythm that follows not the moon but the sun. Researchers in Austria attached precise laser measurements to birch trees and tracked their branches through a full night. What they found was this: at night, the branches dropped. Not dramatically a matter of centimeters, but measurably, consistently, across the whole tree. The branches lowered themselves toward the ground in the hours of darkness. And then, before dawn, before light arrived, they began slowly rising again. The researchers described it, carefully, as sleep. We do not know what a tree experiences. We cannot ask. But we know that something in a birch tree responds to the absence of light by releasing itself into a different state, less taut, less extended, closer to the ground, and then, in the dark hours before morning, begins the long, slow movement back toward waking. You are not the only one who does this, and what the trees give in their waking hours extends further than the forest. Salmon begin their lives in cold freshwater streams, then travel to the ocean, where they spend years growing large on marine nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, the minerals of the deep sea. Then they return. They find the exact stream where they were born, through smell, through magnetic sense, through mechanisms we still do not fully understand, and they swim upstream. Many of them die there. After spawning, their bodies remain, and what happens next is extraordinary in its quietness. Bears carry salmon carcasses into the forest. Eagles drop pieces. The bodies decompose into the soil. The marine nitrogen, the deep-sea mineral, carried all that way in the body of a fish, moves into the roots of trees, into the wood, into the leaves. Researchers have found ocean nitrogen in the rings of trees growing miles from any river. The forest and the sea are not separate. They are in continuous, slow exchange, mediated by fish that follow a map they were born knowing, on a journey that ends in giving everything back. Not all gifts from the living world arrive in daylight. In a handful of places on Earth, a lagoon in Puerto Rico, a bay in the Maldives, coves in certain warm coastlines, the water itself glows after dark. Not from anything above the surface, from within it. Single-celled organisms called dinoflagellates live in vast concentrations in these bays. When the water moves, when a wave breaks, when a fish passes, when your hand disturbs the surface, each one emits a brief, cold pulse of blue-green light. A chemical reaction triggered by motion, lasting less than a second. But when millions of them respond at once, the water becomes luminous. Every ripple draws a line of light. A swimming figure leaves a trail of blue fire behind them. The bow wave of a boat burns like something from a dream, and then it fades, and the water is dark again. And somewhere beneath the surface, the organisms are still there, still floating, still holding their light inside them, waiting for the next disturbance. The world keeps so much brightness in reserve. The light in those bays is young, barely a moment old when it reaches your eyes, But the light reaching you from the night sky carries a different kind of age entirely. When you look at the sun briefly, at dusk, when it is safe, the light you see left the sun's surface 8 minutes ago. It crossed 150 million kilometers in the time it might take you to make a cup of tea. But the sun's light begins much deeper than its surface. In the core, where nuclear fusion produces the energy, that energy spends an almost unimaginable amount of time working its way outward through layer after layer of dense plasma, bouncing, absorbing, re-emitting, moving a fraction of a millimeter at a time. By some estimates, the light you see from the sun today began its journey in the sun's core between 10,000 and 170,000 years ago. The warmth on your face on any clear afternoon may be ancient beyond reckoning, born in a star before your species walked upright, making its way slowly toward the surface, and then in 8 minutes, crossing the rest of the distance to you. Ancient patience appears not only in light, but in stone. The reef systems of the world's warm oceans, the Great Barrier Reef, the reefs of the Caribbean, the coral gardens of the Indo-Pacific were built by animals, tiny animals, coral polyps, each one no larger than the tip of your little finger, secreting a hard calcium skeleton around their soft bodies. One polyp deposits a fraction of a millimeter of skeleton in a year. A reef structure can be hundreds of meters tall, hundreds of kilometers long. The mathematics are enormous and deeply slow. Centuries of accumulation, millennia. The reef you could swim along in an afternoon took longer to build than human civilization has existed to measure. And on top of all those stacked generations of skeletons, the newest polyps live, small and soft and carrying the whole weight of time beneath them, adding their fraction of a millimeter to something that began so long ago the ocean around it has changed its shape since. The ocean carries voices too, in its deeper registers. Humpback whales sing. This is not a casual observation they compose. Male humpbacks produce sequences of sounds that can last for hours, cycling through repeating themes, varying and elaborating. The songs change over time, and the changes spread. A new phrase appears in one whale's song, and within a season it has traveled across an ocean basin, whale to whale, until an entire population is singing a variation. None of them sang the year before. Music, spreading through water, changing as it goes, shared without ever being written down. The songs travel not just between whales, but across vast distances, hundreds of kilometers, sometimes more, carried by the deep sound channel of the ocean where certain frequencies can propagate almost without loss. Right now, somewhere in the dark water, a whale is singing. The sound is moving outward in every direction, slower than light but patient, touching the underwater walls of seamounts and continental shelves, eventually fading into the endless murmur of the deep. You will never hear it, and it is happening anyway. Some things survive because they carry their resilience inward, hidden in their structure. Moss does not look like much. Low, soft, green, it grows on rocks and logs, and the shaded sides of walls, easy to overlook, easy to step past. And yet, moss has been sent into space, exposed to vacuum, to radiation, to the temperature swings of orbit conditions that would destroy almost any complex organism in minutes. It survived. Returned to normal conditions, the moss revived. Quietly, without drama. It simply resumed being moss, as though the interruption had been minor. Moss has been on Earth for at least 450 million years. It survived the mass extinction that killed the dinosaurs. It has colonized volcanic rock within years of eruptions, beginning the long, slow process of making soil where there was none. It is not dramatic about any of this. It does not need to be. There is a kind of strength that shows itself not in resistance, but in persistence, in simply continuing, in any conditions, in any light, with whatever is available. Moss has been practicing that for longer than flowers have existed, and persistence takes its most hidden form beneath the coldest place on Earth. Antarctica is a desert, the driest, coldest, windiest continent, scoured by katabatic winds, buried under ice that in places is 4 kilometers thick. It seems, from any distance, entirely still. But beneath that ice, in the absolute darkness under kilometers of frozen weight, rivers flow. Liquid rivers, kept from freezing not by warmth from above, there is none, but by geothermal heat rising from the rock below, and by the pressure of all that ice pressing down. The combination keeps water moving in the darkness, carving channels, filling lakes, flowing between them in drainage systems as complex as anything on the surface. Scientists have drilled carefully into these lakes and found life. Microbial life, isolated from the rest of the biosphere for millions of years, surviving in cold and darkness and pressure, in water that has not touched open air since before our species existed. They are down there right now, whatever they are, doing whatever they do. In the darkness beneath the cold, in the rivers no one will ever swim, life continues, patient and unhurried, exactly as it has always continued. That patience beneath the ice has its echo above the ground, in the dark mouths of caves. Some cave systems are not still, not truly. If you stood at the entrance of certain caves, Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, Wind Cave in South Dakota, you would feel it before you saw anything. A movement of air, cool, steady, deliberate. The cave breathing. It happens because caves are not sealed. They are connected to the atmosphere above through cracks and passages too small to enter, but wide enough for air to move through. When atmospheric pressure drops outside as weather systems change, as storms approach the higher pressure, air inside the cave pushes outward. When pressure rises again, the cave draws air back in. The cave inhales. The cave exhales. On its own schedule, in response to the sky above. People have reported candles guttering at cave entrances with no wind in sight. Leaves trembling at the mouth of a hillside, opening on a perfectly still day. The earth, breathing quietly, in rhythm with the weather passing over it. There is something deeply settling about that image. The ground beneath your feet, connected to the sky above you, exchanging air between them, in a slow and patient respiration that has nothing to do with you and asks nothing of you. It simply continues. The sky, meanwhile, keeps its own kind of calendar. On clear nights, far from city light, certain birds are awake and moving. Not all birds migrate by day. Many of the smaller songbirds travel at night, navigating hundreds of kilometers in darkness, using a guidance system we are only beginning to understand. They read the stars, not randomly specifically. Young birds, in their first autumn, learn the rotation of the night sky, identifying the point around which the stars appear to wheel. In the northern hemisphere, that point is near Polaris. In experiments conducted inside planetariums, researchers altered which star appeared to be the pivot point, and the birds reoriented toward it, adjusting their intended direction accordingly. They are not following a single star. They are reading the geometry of the whole sky, understanding rotation, locating north from the pattern of movement, rather than any fixed point. And they do this in the dark, alone, often over open ocean, in their first year of life, without having been taught. The night sky is not empty above you right now. It is a map, actively being read. Below those traveling birds, in the great sand seas of the world, something else is moving through the dark. In certain deserts, the Sahara, the Gobi, the dunes of the Namib, when the wind strikes a slope of sand at the right angle, the dune begins to hum, not whistle, not rustle, hum. A deep, resonant tone that can reach 105 decibels, as loud as a motorcycle, felt in the chest as much as heard by the ears. It happens because individual grains of sand, rounded and polished by long years of wind, slide against each other in sheets. When the movement reaches a certain speed and regularity, the entire dune surface begins to vibrate in phase, and the sound it produces is not noise but tone, a specific musical note, stable and sustained, that can last for several minutes. Marco Polo described hearing it during his crossing of the Gobi in the 13th century. He thought it was spirits, the desert, in its own voice, singing to itself in frequencies that reach through your ribs and settle somewhere below thought. No spirits, just sand and physics, and the particular patience of a dune that has been shaped by the same wind for 10,000 years. The wind carries more than sound. Albatrosses, the wandering albatross in particular, with a wingspan that can reach 3.5 meters, can fly for months without landing. They travel the Southern Ocean in great arcing loops, riding the gradient of wind speeds between the ocean surface and the air above, a technique called dynamic soaring that allows them to extract energy from the wind itself. They do not fight the air, they read it. They angle into gusts, rise, turn, descend, rise again, each maneuver harvesting momentum from the moving atmosphere. The result is continuous flight that costs almost nothing. A heart rate, in cruising flight, barely above resting. And when they need to rest, they rest on the wing. Their brain enters a state of slow-wave sleep on one side, while the other remains alert. They glide, for months, over oceans that have no landmarks, in weather that would ground any human aircraft, sleeping in the air above the largest stretches of open water on Earth. The albatross has been doing this for millions of years. The Southern Ocean winds that carry it are the same winds, shaped by the same geography, that carried its ancestors. Some individual birds tracked by researchers have flown more than 1 million kilometers in a lifetime. 1 million kilometers on a planet with a circumference of 40,000. Closer to the surface, in meadows and gardens and anywhere flowers grow, a different kind of navigation is happening. Bees communicate, not in the way we use the word loosely but precisely, informationally, in a system that encodes direction and distance into movement. A forager bee that has found a good source of nectar returns to the hive and performs what researchers call the waggle dance. The angle of the straight run in the dance corresponds to the angle of the food source relative to the sun. The duration of the waggle phase corresponds to the distance. Other bees attend, follow, measure, and then depart in the correct direction to a location they have never visited, guided entirely by the choreography of another bee's body. There is no map, there is no speech, there is only movement, watched and understood, translating a specific point in the landscape into a set of gestures in the dark interior of a hive. And it works, precisely, reliably, in a system that predates human language by tens of millions of years. Language takes many forms in the living world, but some of nature's most precise communication is written not in movement or chemistry, but in geometry. Every snowflake begins as a single water molecule attaching to a microscopic dust particle in a cloud. As more molecules join, they align according to the rules of hydrogen bonding, each water molecule forming connections at angles of 104.5 degrees. This molecular geometry propagates outward as the crystal grows, branching, extending, always honoring the same underlying angle. The result is six-fold symmetry, always 6. In every snowflake that has ever fallen, in every part of the world, in every winter since water has existed in clouds on this planet. The particular shape, the specific arrangement of branches and plates, depends on the exact temperature and humidity the flake passes through on its way down. No two paths through the air are identical. No two snowflakes are identical, but the sixness is constant. Geometry, encoded in the angle of a molecular bond, expressed in every crystal of every snowfall, quietly, without variation, for as long as this planet has had weather. Beneath the reach of weather, beneath the deepest diving whale, beneath the last trace of sunlight, the ocean floor holds a different kind of life. Below 1,000 meters, the water is completely dark. The pressure at 3,000 meters is 300 times what you feel at the surface. The temperature hovers just above freezing. And in that cold and dark and crushing weight, the ocean floor is not empty. It is covered. In sediment, yes, but moving through and across that sediment are creatures. Sea cucumbers grazing on organic particles that drift down from the surface world above. Brittle stars moving across the mud on delicate arms. Fish with enormous eyes built to catch the faintest traces of bioluminescence. The deep ocean floor is the largest habitat on Earth by area. More of this planet's surface lies in that cold darkness than in all the sunlit zones combined. And almost none of it has been seen. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than of our own ocean floor. What moves through that darkness tonight? In pressures that would crush a submarine, in cold that has not changed in millennia, we largely do not know. It continues regardless. What we do know is that some things find their way home across that darkness. The monarch butterfly weighs less than a paperclip. Its brain is smaller than the head of a pin. And yet, every autumn, monarchs across eastern North America fly up to 4,500 kilometers to a cluster of Oyamel fir forests high in the mountains of central Mexico, a place none of them has ever been. The butterflies that make the journey are the great-grandchildren of the ones that left Mexico the previous spring. They have never seen the destination. No one taught them the route, and yet they arrive to the same forests, sometimes to the same trees, clustering in masses that bend branches under their collective weight. They navigate using the sun, compensating for its movement across the sky with an internal clock. They also appear to use Earth's magnetic field, and possibly the angle of polarized light. For something that weighs less than a paperclip, the monarch carries a navigation system of extraordinary sophistication, inherited whole, used once, then passed forward into the next generation, which will use it to return. Inheritance flows through the living world in forms that quietly astonish. Sea turtles hatch on a beach, scramble to the water, and disappear into the ocean. They spend decades at sea, crossing entire ocean basins, growing, navigating, feeding. And then, when the time comes to nest, they return. Not to a beach, to the beach. The specific stretch of sand where they hatched, sometimes 30 years before. They do it using Earth's magnetic field. Each beach has a unique magnetic signature, a particular combination of field intensity and inclination. The hatchling records that signature in the first hours of life. Decades later, that recorded signature draws them back across thousands of kilometers of open water to within a few kilometers of the exact location. The ocean is not featureless to a sea turtle. It is a magnetic landscape, as detailed and navigable as any map. Right now, somewhere in the dark water, a turtle is moving toward a beach it has not seen in 30 years, following a signal it recorded as a hatchling the size of your palm, faithful to a memory encoded not in thought, but in the body itself. The body remembers in ways the mind cannot access, and the earth beneath the body remembers too. The Himalayas, the highest mountain range on Earth, home to Everest and K2 and dozens of peaks above 7,000 meters, are still growing. The Indian tectonic plate is moving northward into the Eurasian plate at roughly the speed a human fingernail grows. The collision began about 50 million years ago, and it has not stopped. Everest gains a few millimeters of height each year. The mountain you see in photographs is not the mountain as it is today. It is already slightly taller. The forces involved are incomprehensible in human terms. Entire continental plates, thousands of kilometers across, moving through geological time with the patience of something that does not experience impatience because it does not experience time at all. And the mountain rises, quietly, without announcement, a few millimeters at a time, pushed upward by forces that began before any mammal walked the earth, continuing tonight while you are still. What rises slowly can also glow suddenly. In certain valleys in the forests of Tennessee and South Carolina, on warm, humid nights in early summer, something happens that scientists have studied for decades and still cannot fully explain. Fireflies, thousands of them, spread across the trees and undergrowth of a hillside, begin to flash. Not randomly, the way fireflies flash in an ordinary summer garden, in unison. One flash, then darkness, then another flash, across the whole hillside simultaneously, as though a single switch controlled every light in the forest. The synchrony emerges without a conductor. No single firefly leads. Each one adjusts its rhythm slightly toward the rhythms of those around it, and from that local adjustment, through some process that cascades across the whole population, perfect synchrony emerges. A hillside of individual creatures, each making its own small light, producing together something that feels like it was designed. It was not designed, it simply arose. From the same impulse that moves a murmuration of starlings, that aligns the clapping of a crowd, the tendency of rhythmic things, when placed near enough to each other, to find the same beat. The forest, for a few weeks each year, pulses. Some things wait far longer than a season. In 1999, miners in Canada, drilling 2.7 kilometers into ancient Precambrian rock, discovered water. Not recent water, filtered down from the surface, ancient water, sealed in the rock since before complex life existed on Earth, since before the first fish, since before the first plant. Water that had not touched air or light or any other water for 2.7 billion years. When researchers analyzed it, they found it was rich in dissolved gases, hydrogen, methane that could potentially sustain microbial life. And they found evidence that life was present, or had been, in that sealed and lightless pocket of the deepest Earth. 2.7 billion years. The universe itself is only about 5 times older than that water. It had been there, in the dark, in the rock, sealed and patient, since before the oxygen in the air you are breathing now existed, since before photosynthesis had remade this planet's atmosphere, since before the ancestors of every visible living thing on Earth had yet appeared. The Earth keeps things, quietly, in the dark, for longer than we have language to describe. The ocean keeps things too, in its own luminous way. Off the coasts of California, British Columbia, and Tasmania, in cold, nutrient-rich water, where upwellings bring minerals from the deep, giant kelp grows, not gently, 0.5 meter per day, under ideal conditions. The fastest growing organism on Earth by some measures, building from a single spore anchored to a rock into a frond that can reach 30 meters in a single growing season. From below, looking upward through a kelp forest, the light filters green and shifting through the canopy of fronds. The water moves, and the kelp moves with it, swaying in slow unison like the nave of a cathedral in a very gentle wind. Sea otters wrap themselves in the fronds to sleep without drifting. Juvenile fish shelter in the understory. Sunlight breaks into fragments on the way down. A kelp forest can appear where there was bare rock within a few years, colonizing, structuring, sheltering an entire ecosystem constructed by a plant that grows at a pace you could almost watch. Beneath the surface of cold seas, something is building, continuously, in the green and shifting light. In the building of things, some minds work differently than we expect. Dolphins sleep with half their brain at a time. The technical term is unihemispheric, slow-wave sleep. One cerebral hemisphere, enters the slow, restorative rhythms of sleep, while the other remains active, keeping the dolphin swimming, surfacing to breathe, watching for danger. They can maintain this state for hours, swimming steadily, one eye open, one eye closed, each eye connected to the hemisphere currently awake. A dolphin resting at sea is not vulnerable in the way a sleeping land animal is. It is simply operating on half its available attention, doing enough with what remains to keep itself safe and breathing. Some researchers believe dolphins may experience this as something like a waking dream, the active hemisphere processing the world outside, while the sleeping hemisphere does whatever sleeping hemispheres do, running their slow, restorative cycles in the dark interior of the mind. One eye open, one eye closed, moving through the water, half here, half somewhere else entirely. And where dolphins rest in the open ocean, the stars above them are older than the ocean itself. Every atom of iron in your blood, the iron in every hemoglobin molecule that is carrying oxygen through your body right now as you rest, was not made on Earth. It was not made in our sun. It was forged in a star much larger than our sun, in the nuclear reactions of that star's final stages, and then scattered into space when that star died in a supernova explosion billions of years ago. The cloud of gas and dust left behind eventually gathered, under gravity, into our solar system, into our sun, into the rocky material of Earth, into the chemistry of the early ocean, into the first cells, into every living thing that followed. The iron in your blood has been in stars. It has traveled through the death of at least one sun. It has spent billions of years becoming part of the slow unfolding that eventually produced you, lying here, breathing quietly, with a heart that beats because of atoms older than the planet beneath you. You are not separate from the universe. You are a temporary arrangement of it, one the universe made in order to, among other things, notice itself. The noticing goes deep in the living world. Plant roots can sense each other through the soil, through pressure waves, through chemical gradients, possibly through electrical signals. We are only beginning to detect roots, are aware of the presence of neighboring roots, and they respond. When roots from different plants of the same species approach each other, they often slow their growth, adjusting their spread to avoid competition. When roots from genetically related plants are nearby, some species actually grow toward each other, sharing space more generously. The root does not have a brain. It has no nervous system in any sense we recognize, and yet the root behaves as though it is paying attention, as though the information about what is nearby is being received, processed, and acted upon. We do not have a word for what a plant does when it does this. We borrow words from our own experience, sensing, recognizing, responding, and we hold them lightly, knowing they are approximations for something that is real, but does not map cleanly onto any category we already have. Something is happening down there, in the dark, in the soil, between roots that have never touched. Above the roots, in the cooler air of evening, the flowers that daylight ignored begin to open. Night-blooming flowers, moonflowers, evening primrose, night-blooming jasmine, the Sirius cactus are timed to the dark. Their petals open after sunset, not before. Their scent, which in many cases is absent or faint during the day, intensifies in the evening air, spreading farther in the cooler, denser atmosphere of night. They are not blooming for you. They are blooming for moths, for the long-tongued hawk moths that hover at flowers the way hummingbirds do, drinking nectar in the dark. White petals, in many night-blooming species, are not accidental. White is visible in low light, a landing signal for a pollinator navigating by moonlight and scent. A night-blooming garden is a transaction conducted entirely in the dark, between flowers that open only when most eyes are closed, and moths that navigate by a star 384,000 kilometers away. and the scent drifts on the night air through it all, reaching anyone still awake to receive it, carrying something it did not intend specifically for you but gives to you anyway. The redwood coast of Northern California holds a different kind of exchange between the living and what surrounds it. Coast redwoods, the tallest trees on Earth, some reaching over 100 meters, grow in a narrow band along the Pacific coast where summer fog is reliable. And the fog is not incidental to them. It is essential. In the dry summer months, when rain does not fall, the redwoods absorb moisture directly through their needles from the fog that rolls in off the cold ocean. Up to 40% of their water intake in dry months may come this way. The needles, covered in microscopic structures that collect fog droplets, funnel water down through the bark and into the soil, where it becomes available to the shallow root system. The tree is drinking the cloud. A redwood in summer fog is not simply enduring dry conditions. It is harvesting the sky. Using the cold air off the ocean, the particular temperature of the California coast, the physics of condensation on a waxy needle surface, to pull water out of what appears to be nothing and bring it into the living wood. The tree does not know it is doing this. It is simply built in a way that makes it happen. That is, in its own way, a kind of genius. Genius of a different order stands in the dry savannas of Africa and Madagascar. The baobab tree looks, famously, as though it has been planted upside down, its sparse, stubby branches reaching into the sky like roots, its enormous trunk swelling outward into a shape that seems more geological than botanical. Some trunks reach 15 meters in circumference. Some are hollow. Some have been used as shelters, as storage rooms, as small chapels. Inside that trunk is water, thousands of liters, stored in the fibrous wood, sealed in by bark that resists evaporation. During years of drought, not months, years, the baobab sustains itself on what it has stored. It swells in wet years and shrinks, visibly, in dry ones, its circumference changing with the rainfall like a slow, wooden tide gauge. And it is not only sustaining itself. Birds nest in its hollows. Bats drink from its flowers at night. Baboons, elephants, and humans all eat its fruit, drink its stored water during droughts, use its bark for rope, and its leaves for medicine. A single tree, standing in dry ground, quietly holding thousands of liters of life inside itself, available to whatever comes to ask. And far to the north, on nights when the sky is dark enough and the atmosphere is disturbed enough, the air itself becomes light. The aurora borealis in the north, aurora australis in the south, begins at the sun. Not with visible light, but with charged particles streaming outward from the solar surface in the solar wind, traveling 150 million kilometers in 2 or 3 days, arriving at Earth's magnetic field. Where those particles meet the field, they are guided downward toward the poles, funneled into the upper atmosphere. There, they collide with oxygen and nitrogen atoms, exciting them into higher energy states. When those atoms return to their resting state, they release that energy as light. Green from oxygen at lower altitudes, red from oxygen higher up, blue and purple from nitrogen. The curtains of color that move across a polar sky on a clear winter night are the sun's breath, translated by your planet's magnetic field into something visible. A conversation between the star that made this system and the planet that sustains you, conducted in light, across the full width of the solar system, arriving overhead quietly and without announcement. It has been happening, on and off, since Earth first had a magnetic field, long before there were eyes to see it. Light takes so many forms in the living world. Some of the quietest arrive in the smallest packages. The glass frog of Central and South America is, in daylight, unremarkable, in size smaller than a thumb, green enough to vanish against a leaf. But in certain species, The skin of the underside is transparent, not translucent transparent. You can see the heart beating, the liver, the digestive tract, the eggs in a female, glowing faintly through the skin like lanterns seen through paper. And when a glass frog needs to hide, it does something more remarkable still. It actively redistributes its red blood cells away from the peripheral vessels and into the liver, where a reflective surface conceals them. The frog becomes, measurably, more transparent, reducing the visual contrast that might betray it to a predator by up to 60%. It is not simply camouflage. It is active, physiological transparency, the animal making itself less present in the world by literally moving its own blood out of sight. To watch one on a leaf, its small heart visible and beating, is to feel something that sits between wonder and tenderness. Something that small, working that hard, to simply continue. Continuation is the deep theme of the living world, and perhaps nowhere is it more quietly expressed than in the sound the earth itself makes. The planet hums, not metaphorically physically, at frequencies between 2 and 7 MHz, far below the threshold of human hearing. Earth produces a continuous, very low vibration. Seismologists first detected it in the 1990s, using instruments built to measure earthquakes. There was signal present even when no earthquake was occurring. Constant, global, unceasing. The source is still debated. Ocean waves interacting with the seafloor, atmospheric pressure variations, the movement of wind over mountain ranges, possibly all of these together, combining into a planetary resonance, the Earth, as a whole body, vibrating in its own fundamental frequency. You cannot hear it. You have never heard it, and it has been present beneath every moment of your life, beneath every conversation, beneath every night of sleep. You have ever had a tone so low it passes through you without your knowledge, the ground note of everything. The planet, quietly, holding its own note in the dark. Quieter still, in the coastal margins where land and sea negotiate their borders, something else is building. Mangrove forests grow in the intertidal zone in saltwater, in mud, in conditions that would kill most trees within days. Their roots arch out of the water in elaborate structures that look like frozen movement, like a tree caught mid-step into the sea. And those roots do something extraordinary to the water moving through them. They slow it. Tidal water moving through a mangrove forest loses most of its energy to the resistance of the root structures. Sediment that the water was carrying settles out, drops to the bottom, accumulates. Over years, over decades, new landforms built from the particles the mangrove roots have stilled from moving water, grain by grain, in the patient arithmetic of the intertidal zone. Mangroves make land. They stand in the sea, and, by simply being there, by slowing what passes through them, they create new ground behind them. There is something in that worth carrying towards sleep. The idea that stillness in the right place can be generative, that simply slowing things down can be a way of building something new. Building through collective movement takes a different form in the winter skies above Europe and the Middle East. Murmurations of starlings, the word itself is onomatopoeic. Carrying something of what it describes involve hundreds of thousands of birds moving as a single fluid shape. The flock contracts, expands, folds back on itself, stretches into thin filaments, and then collapses into a dense churning mass, all without collision, all without a leader. The rule each bird follows is simple. Track your 7 nearest neighbors. Match their speed and direction. Avoid getting too close. That is all. From those 3 local rules, applied simultaneously by hundreds of thousands of birds, the murmuration emerges. The shape the flock makes is not planned by any bird. It arises from the interaction of all of them, each one responding only to what is immediately around it. Complexity from simplicity, pattern from local response. Something that looks, from outside, like intention, like choreography, like a single vast mind moving through the sky arising from 7 birds, tracked, adjusted to, 7 birds at a time. The shape the flock makes has never existed before. It will never exist again. It lasts for minutes, then the birds descend to roost, and the sky is ordinary again. Ordinary skies hold ordinary miracles. A seed, for instance, can hold more patience than a sky holds stars. In 1963, archaeologists excavating the ruins of Masada, the ancient fortress on a cliff above the Dead Sea, found a cache of date palm seeds in a storage jar. The seeds were approximately 2,000 years old. The Judean date palm, the species to which they belonged, had been extinct for centuries. In 2005, a researcher planted one. With careful attention to moisture and temperature, it germinated. From a seed that had been sealed in a storage jar since the time of the Roman Empire, a tree grew. It was given the name Methuselah, after the oldest figure in the Hebrew Bible. It is now over 1 meter tall and has produced pollen. 2,000 years of waiting, in the dark of a clay jar, in the ruins of a fortress on a cliff in the desert. And then, given water and warmth and time, the beginning of a tree. The seed did not know it was waiting. It simply remained capable. That may be the most patient thing in the world. Not enduring, exactly, but simply remaining, undamaged, open to the possibility of beginning again. In the deep ocean, beginning again takes the form of an ending. When a whale dies at sea, its body sinks. In the deep ocean, this event called a whale fall creates an ecosystem. The carcass of a large whale can sustain a succession of biological communities for up to a century. First, mobile scavengers, sharks, hagfish, crabs, strip the soft tissue in a matter of months. Then, enrichment opportunists, polychaete worms, crustaceans colonize the bones. Then, in the final and longest stage, sulfophilic bacteria break down the lipids in the bone itself, producing hydrogen sulfide that chemosynthetic organisms use as an energy source, creating a community that functions like a small hydrothermal vent. A single whale body, sinking through darkness, becomes a century of life for communities that would otherwise have nothing. In the deep ocean, death is not an ending. It is a location, a place where life concentrates, in the dark, around what was given. Even in the deepest and most lightless places, nothing is wasted. Everything becomes something else. Something else is always beginning, even in what appears most barren. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile is one of the driest places on Earth. In some parts, no rain has been recorded in recorded human history. The soil surface is pale and cracked and empty, and from any distance it looks as close to lifeless as a landscape can get, while still technically being on Earth. But the seeds are there, buried in that dry soil, dormant for years, sometimes for decades, are the seeds of dozens of flowering plant species. They need almost nothing to remain viable. They simply wait. When rain comes, a genuine soaking rain, rare enough to be measured in single events, rather than seasonal patterns, the Atacama blooms. Within days of the rain, the desert surface is covered with flowers. Yellow, pink, purple, white, spreading across the pale ground in every direction, dense enough to be visible from space. The bloom lasts 2 or 3 weeks. Then the seeds set, fall, and the desert returns to its pale silence. But the seeds remain, waiting, as they always have, in the dry and patient ground, for the next rain that may not come for another decade, holding, in their sealed interior, the complete instructions for a flower, a color, a scent, everything needed, needing only water and time. Time, compressed into ice, turns a particular shade of blue. When snow falls and accumulates in a glacier, the weight of new layers compresses the layers below. Air bubbles, trapped at first in large numbers, are slowly squeezed out as the ice grows denser. After centuries of compression, the ice that results is nearly bubble-free, so dense that it absorbs the longer wavelengths of visible light, the reds and yellows, and scatters the short ones. Blue light escapes. Ancient glacial ice is blue, not because of any impurity, not because of reflection from the sky, but because of time, because centuries of compression have removed enough air to change how the ice interacts with light. The blue of a glacial crevasse is the color of compressed time, visible. To look into old ice is to see something that has no equivalent in ordinary experience. A blue so deep and pure it seems lit from within, which, in a sense, it is lit by the same light that falls on everything, simply changed by the density of years. Above the glaciers, above the weather, above the reach of any mountain, the sky produces its own light after dark. Noctilucent clouds form at approximately 80 kilometers altitude in the mesosphere, far above where weather happens, far above where aircraft fly, at the very edge of the atmosphere, where the air is thin enough to be almost nothing. They are made of ice crystals, forming on dust particles, possibly meteor smoke at temperatures of -120 degrees Celsius. They are invisible during the day. They become visible in the deep twilight of high-latitude summers, when the sun has set at the surface, but its light still reaches that extreme altitude, illuminating these high clouds against the darkening sky from below. They glow, silver blue, rippled, moving in slow waves across the upper atmosphere, visible for an hour or two after sunset, then gone as the geometry of the sun's angle changes. They are becoming more frequent. The reasons are not fully understood. Possibly more water vapor reaching extreme altitudes, possibly changes in atmospheric chemistry. Something is changing, up there in the cold and dark, and we are only beginning to understand what. For now, they glow, after everyone else has stopped looking at the sky. For those patient enough to wait, silver light at the edge of space, rippling slowly in winds that no weather forecast has ever measured. Measured in heartbeats, the living world spans a range almost impossible to hold in a single thought. The hummingbird's heart beats 1,200 times per minute in flight. In a single minute of hovering something, a hummingbird does routinely, visiting dozens of flowers in an hour. Its heart completes more cycles than a resting human heart does in 20 minutes. And then, at night, the hummingbird enters torpor. Its body temperature drops toward ambient. Its heart rate falls to as few as 50 beats per minute, a reduction of more than 95%. Its metabolic rate slows to the minimum necessary to remain alive, conserving the energy reserves it will need to warm itself and resume activity at dawn. The hummingbird does not decide to do this. Its body does it automatically, in response to darkness and cooling temperature, every night of its life. It goes from the fastest beating heart of any warm-blooded animal to something approaching stillness, every single night. And every morning, it warms itself back to full operation in a matter of minutes, and resumes. The distance between full aliveness and near stillness, traveled every night, traveled back every morning. The hummingbird lives at both extremes, fully, without difficulty, as a matter of routine. Routine, in the living world, so often conceals something extraordinary. Elephants communicate across distances that make the word conversation seem too small. They produce sounds in the infrasound range frequencies below 20 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing that travel through both air and ground simultaneously. Other elephants receive these calls not only through their ears but through the sensitive skin of their feet and trunks, which detect the ground vibrations directly. A low rumble from one elephant can be detected by another several kilometers away. through the earth itself. They use this capacity to coordinate movement across large landscapes, to warn of danger, to maintain contact with family members separated by distance, to announce readiness to mate. The calls carry information specific, distinguishable, responded to appropriately by the receiving elephant in ways that confirm comprehension. You cannot hear any of this, but right now, somewhere on the African savanna, elephants are speaking to each other through the ground, in frequencies that pass through your body, without your knowledge, carrying news across a landscape in a register the landscape itself conducts. The earth is full of conversations happening at scales you cannot access. You are surrounded by them, always, without knowing. Some conversations happen entirely in the dark, between flowers and the night. Night-blooming jasmine Cestrum nocturnum releases its fragrance after sunset. During the day, the flowers are nearly scentless, small, unremarkable. But as the light fades, the plant begins producing volatile compounds in quantities that can scent an entire garden, an entire street, detectable from 50 meters away on a still night. The fragrance is not produced for you. It is produced for hawk moths, which navigate by scent as much as by sight, following chemical gradients through the dark to find the flower's nectar. The plant has calibrated its chemistry to the activity patterns of its pollinator flowering at night because its pollinator is nocturnal, intensifying its scent in the cooler air, where molecules travel farther and linger longer. This synchrony flower and moth, scent and night air, the chemistry of one living thing tuned precisely to the behavior of another, has been refined over millions of years of mutual adjustment. Neither the flower nor the moth planned it. It simply became more precise, generation by generation, until the fit between them was close to perfect. On a warm night, if the jasmine is nearby, its scent reaches you for free, an accident of proximity. A gift not intended for you that arrives anyway, carried on the same air that carries everything else. Air carries more than scent. In the right conditions, it carries the ocean's conversation with the land. Octopuses have been observed, during sleep, cycling through rapid color changes their chromatophores, the pigment cells that allow them to change color in waking life, flickering through patterns of light and dark across their skin. The changes last for seconds, then subside, then return. Some researchers watching this have described it as resembling the color patterns an octopus displays while hunting or hiding while awake. No one can say what an octopus experiences during sleep. The question of octopus consciousness is genuinely open. Their nervous system is distributed so differently from ours, with 2/3 of their neurons located in their arms rather than their central brain, that our usual frameworks for thinking about experience may not apply. But something is happening. In the dark, in the still water, the sleeping octopus moves through patterns of color, cycling through what looks, from outside, like a private experience of something. A dream, perhaps, in the only sense that word can be stretched to reach across such a different kind of mind. Even as you rest right now, somewhere in the dark water, an octopus is dreaming in color, in a language of light written on its own skin. In rivers where light barely penetrates the turbid water, navigation takes a different form entirely. The boto, or Amazon river dolphin, lives in the flooded forests and sediment-heavy rivers of the Amazon basin, where visibility can be measured in centimeters. Its eyes, though present, have become largely vestigial, small, functional enough to detect light and dark, but not much more. Instead, the boto navigates by echolocation of extraordinary sophistication, emitting clicks and reading the returning echoes to construct a detailed acoustic image of everything around it: submerged tree roots, the bottom topography, fish hiding in the silt, other dolphins moving through the murk. The boto can thread through the submerged trunks of a flooded forest at full speed in what appears to complete darkness. Reading the acoustic landscape faster than sight would allow even if the water were clear. It lives in a world built entirely from sound. The river, to a boto, is not dark. It is loud with information, every surface returning its own echo. The forest underwater as legible as open air to an animal that has learned to hear the shape of things. The shape of things, in the ocean's saltiest places, produces a different kind of wonder. The Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth's land surface, at 430 meters below sea level, is so saturated with dissolved minerals that its density approaches 1.24 kilograms per liter, compared to 1.025 for ordinary seawater. A human body, with a density close to that of fresh water, floats in it effortlessly and completely not treading water, not swimming, simply lying on the surface as though the water were a solid surface. You can sit upright in the Dead Sea. You can hold a book above the water and read it, your body supported without effort. The buoyancy is so pronounced it can be disorienting. The body expects to have to work to stay afloat, and the absence of that work feels, briefly, like floating in the air. Almost nothing lives in the Dead Sea. The salt concentration is simply too high for most organisms, but not all. Certain halophilic salt-loving bacteria thrive in its brine, tinting the water in places a faint pink, carrying on their chemical lives in conditions that are lethal to almost everything else. Even in the saltiest, most inhospitable water on Earth, something has found a way to belong. Belonging, in the ocean's shallower, cooler zones, takes the form of an entire architecture. A tidal pool is a small thing. You could step across most of them in 2 or 3 paces. But within that space, compressed and arranged by the physics of tides and the chemistry of seawater, is an ecosystem of extraordinary density. Sea anemones, limpets, hermit crabs, periwinkles, tiny fish, sea urchins, coralline algae, mussels, barnacles, dozens of species in a space you could shelter under a beach towel. Each one occupies a precise position determined by how much tidal exposure it can tolerate. The highest zones belong to the most durable organisms, those that can survive hours of air and sun and drying. Lower down, the more delicate species, those that need near constant immersion. The tidal pool is a gradient, a living map of tolerance and preference, arranged vertically across a few meters of rock, renewed by the tide twice a day. To crouch beside one and look carefully is to discover that what appeared to be bare rock is covered with life so precisely arranged it looks like it was planned. It was not planned. It simply sorted itself, over time, into the configuration that worked. Configuration and time conspire in the cold northern waters to produce something ancient and almost impossibly slow. The Greenland shark grows at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per year. It reaches sexual maturity at around 150 years of age. Its lifespan, determined by radiocarbon dating of the proteins in its eye lenses, proteins that form before birth and are never replaced, can exceed 400 years. Some Greenland sharks alive today were born before the telescope was invented, before the scientific method was formalized, before the last great auk went extinct. They were already old when the American Revolution occurred. They move slowly through the cold, dark water, unhurried, carrying centuries of accumulated experience in a body shaped almost identically to the sharks that swam these waters when Greenland first received its name. They are rarely seen. They live deep, in cold, that preserves them and slows them and gives them their extraordinary longevity. If you were to meet one, and almost no one has, you would be looking at an animal that has been alive continuously, longer than most countries have existed. It would not look back with recognition, but it would be there, ancient and unhurried, in the dark and cold, on its own schedule, unimpressed by the shortness of your time. Time, in the warm, tropical seas, is written in light. In the deep ocean below 200 meters, where sunlight cannot reach an estimated 76% of all living species produce bioluminescence. The deep ocean is not dark in the way a closed room is dark. It is lit, dimly, constantly, from within a slow, living luminescence produced by creatures for whom light is communication, camouflage, predation, and courtship. Phosphorescent plankton near the surface take this further. Single-celled dinoflagellates, some of the oldest life forms on Earth, predating multicellular life, emit a flash of blue light lasting about 100 milliseconds when mechanically disturbed. The chemistry is the same across the many species that do it. Luciferin oxidized by luciferase, producing light with almost no heat. On warm nights, in waters with high dinoflagellate concentrations, the sea surface glows. Every wave that breaks reveals blue fire. Every stroke of a swimmer's arm draws a line of light. Fish moving near the surface leave trails. The entire surface of the ocean becomes a medium that records movement in cold blue light, briefly, before returning to dark. The light is not for you, and it is given to you anyway, every time you move through the water on a warm and moonless night. Movement through darkness, for trees, is a different kind of journey entirely. In autumn, a deciduous tree does not simply lose its leaves. It carefully, methodically, seals them off. As days shorten, the tree begins producing a layer of specialized cells, the abscission layer, at the base of each leaf stem. This layer gradually cuts off the flow of water and nutrients to the leaf. The green chlorophyll, no longer maintained, breaks down, revealing the yellows and oranges that were present in the leaf all along, masked by the dominant green. The tree does not shed its leaves passively. It reclaims what it can first, pulling nitrogen and other nutrients back into the woody tissue for winter storage. And then, when the leaf has been fully stripped of recoverable resources, it releases it. The color of autumn is not the color of dying. It is the color of efficient withdrawal, of a tree doing careful accounting before the cold comes, taking back everything it can use before letting go of what it no longer needs. The falling leaf is not abandoned. It has been thoroughly used, carefully released, and is now beginning its next work, decomposing into the soil that fed the tree that made it. Nothing wasted, everything continuing through water that reaches temperatures no living thing should survive. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon is one of the strangest rivers on Earth. The boiling river known locally as Shanai Timpishka, meaning heated by the heat of the sun, though the sun is not its source, flows for over 6 kilometers through dense jungle, its water reaching temperatures between 45 and 100 degrees Celsius along its length. Animals that fall in do not survive. The steam rises continuously into the forest canopy above. Its heat source is geothermal water, percolating deep into the earth through fault lines, absorbing heat from the rock, returning to the surface far from any volcano. The nearest volcanic center is 700 kilometers away. The mechanism by which water travels that distance and returns to the surface so hot is still not fully understood. Local Amazonian communities have known about the river for generations. It appears in their oral tradition as a place of spiritual significance, a wound in the earth where the heat of the world's interior becomes visible, where the boundary between the surface and what lies beneath it briefly dissolves. On cool mornings, the steam from the water mingles with the mist of the jungle. The river breathes, and the forest that surrounds it, which should, by any logic, be inhospitable to the usual density of Amazon life, is full of birds and insects and the ordinary sounds of the living world, going about its business beside something that should not exist. Beside the impossible, the living world places the quietly miraculous and asks you to notice both. In Alaska, in the shallow ponds and wetlands of the boreal forest, the wood frog prepares for winter in a way that should not work. As temperatures drop in autumn, the frog does not burrow deep enough to avoid freezing. It freezes. Ice crystals form in its body cavity, between its organs, under its skin. Up to 65% of the water in its body becomes ice. Its heart stops. Its brain shows no electrical activity. Its blood does not flow. By any definition we normally use, the wood frog in January is not alive. But it is not dead either. Special compounds, glucose, produced in enormous quantities by the liver as freezing begins, and urea prevent ice from forming inside the cells themselves, where it would rupture the cell membranes and cause irreversible damage. The cells are protected. Everything outside them can freeze. In spring, the ice melts. The heart restarts first, a few uncoordinated contractions, then a rhythm. Blood moves. The frog, after minutes or hours, hops away. It does this every winter. It has done this every winter for as long as wood frogs have existed in cold climates. The body, it turns out, knows how to pause, how to wait, how to hold the essential things intact while everything else becomes still. Stillness, in the ocean, is never quite what it appears. Every ocean wave, every one that has ever rolled toward a shore, every one breaking right now on every coastline simultaneously, is not water moving forward. It is energy moving through water. The water molecules in a wave move in circles. They rise as the wave crest passes, fall as the trough follows, and return almost exactly to where they began. The water itself goes nowhere. What travels is the pattern, the shape of the disturbance, propagating outward from whatever created it, moving through the medium of water without carrying the water along. A wave generated by a storm in the South Pacific can travel 15,000 kilometers to break on the coast of Alaska, and the water molecules that make up its final crash on the beach are not the molecules from the storm. They were always there, on the Alaskan shore, waiting to be briefly part of the pattern as it passed through them. What crosses the ocean is not water. It is a form, a shape, a disturbance, traveling. You are a little like that too, a pattern, moving through matter. The atoms of your body replaced continuously, the form persisting while the substance flows through and on. The form of a firefly's light persists, but the light itself carries almost nothing of what we would call waste. A firefly produces light through a chemical reaction between luciferin and luciferase in specialized cells in its abdomen. The reaction is triggered by oxygen, which the firefly controls by regulating airflow through its trachea, essentially switching the light on and off by breathing. What makes this light extraordinary from an engineering perspective is its efficiency. Nearly 100% of the energy in the chemical reaction becomes light. Almost nothing becomes heat. Human incandescent bulbs convert roughly 10% of their energy to light, losing the rest as heat. LED bulbs are more efficient but still produce some heat. The firefly's cold light is, by the measure of efficiency, something our technology has not yet matched. The firefly did not optimize for efficiency. It optimized for visibility in the dark, in a context where heat production would be wasteful and potentially dangerous. Efficiency was a consequence, not a goal. Nature achieves, through evolutionary pressure over millions of years, outcomes that engineering works toward deliberately and has not yet fully reached. The firefly, blinking in a summer hedge, is demonstrating something we are still trying to learn. Learning in the corvid family takes forms that continue to surprise researchers who study them. Crows recognize human faces, not human bodies, not human behavior in general, individual faces specifically. In experiments conducted at the University of Washington, researchers wearing particular masks handled crows in ways the crows found threatening. Later, those same masked faces were encountered in neutral contexts. The crows responded to the threatening masks with alarm calls, mobbing behavior, and agitation, regardless of the body wearing the mask, regardless of what clothing was worn. They also taught the information to their offspring and to other crows who had not been present during the original encounter. A crow in Seattle that was handled by a researcher in 2006 may still, today, recognize that face, may still alert its family group when that face appears, may have passed that recognition onto young crows who have never met the person but know, through crow culture, that this particular human is not to be trusted. Crows have regional dialects. Crows use tools. Crows hold what appear to be funerals, gathering around their dead in silence, apparently assessing what killed them as information for future avoidance. They are watching us with more attention than we typically give them credit for. The crow on the wire above the street is not scenery. It is paying attention. Attention, underground, takes the form of a river that simply disappears. In landscapes underlain by limestone karst terrain, found across much of Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Americas, rivers reach a point in their course where the rock beneath them is more crack than stone, riddled with passages dissolved by millennia of slightly acidic water moving through them. And the river, reaching this point, simply goes in. It vanishes into the ground, continues underground, sometimes for kilometers, through passages that may be vast enough to kayak through, or narrow enough to squeeze water through grain by grain. It moves through chambers and galleries, past formations of calcite built by the water that preceded it, in darkness that has not seen light since the cave formed. Then, it emerges. Somewhere downstream, through a spring or a cave opening, the river reappears in daylight, looking like any other river, carrying no outward sign of where it has been. The Puerto Princesa subterranean river in the Philippines travels 8 kilometers underground before reaching the sea, its ceiling hung with stalactites, its waters moving through a darkness that tourists now visit by boat, floating through the earth in the belly of a living geological system. The river does not stop being a river because it goes underground. It simply becomes briefly invisible, continuing its work in the dark, reappearing when the rock allows. What the rock allows, in the Arctic, is a forest that grows in a permanent long exposure. Above the Arctic Circle, in summer, the sun does not set. For weeks, sometimes months, depending on the latitude, daylight is continuous. The sky moves from bright to slightly less bright, and back to bright, but true darkness does not come. In these conditions, the trees grow continuously. Birches and spruce that experience only a few weeks of full summer compress a year's worth of growth into that brief window of light, their cells dividing without the interruption of night, their rings recording the endless days, as a particularly wide and dense band of wood. The rings of an Arctic tree are a compressed calendar, each one representing not just the passage of a year, but the intensity of its summer, the width and density of the wood, a record of how much light arrived and for how long. And in winter, the same trees stand in months of near darkness, their sap stilled, their growth stopped, waiting with the patience of things that have done this 10,000 times before, knowing in whatever sense a tree knows anything that the light will return. It always has. For as long as this forest has been a forest, the light has always returned. Returning, for the Amazon, means something vast and self-sustaining. The Amazon rainforest covers approximately 5.5 million square kilometers. Within that area, the forest produces its own weather. Trees transpire, release water vapor through their leaves at rates that, aggregated across billions of trees, pump an estimated 20 billion tons of water into the atmosphere above the Amazon every day. This moisture rises, cools, condenses into clouds, and falls back as rain. The same water, cycling. The forest drinking, breathing, raining, drinking again, a closed loop of extraordinary scale. The forest sustaining the conditions that sustain the forest. The clouds produced by Amazon transpiration don't only fall back on the Amazon, they move. The atmospheric rivers generated by this vast transpiration carry moisture westward, where they rise against the Andes and fall as rain that feeds rivers flowing east. They carry moisture southward, influencing rainfall patterns across much of South America. The forest is not just sustaining itself, it is sustaining a continent's worth of weather from the inside. It has been doing this for millions of years. The particular pattern of rainfall across South America, which rivers run, which valleys are fertile, which regions are dry, is, in part, a consequence of a forest making its own climate, continuously from the inside out. From inside the rock, deep in Earth's magnetic fabric, birds read a map we cannot see. Some birds, European robins, zebra finches, possibly many others, appear to have a form of magnetic vision. Specialized proteins in their eyes called cryptochromes are sensitive to magnetic fields, and current evidence suggests that the magnetic field creates a subtle visual effect, a faint pattern of light and dark overlaid on ordinary vision that indicates magnetic direction. If this is correct, a migrating bird does not simply feel north as a sensation the way we might feel warmth. It may see north a directional brightness, or a shadow, or a pattern that appears in the visual field and indicates orientation. The world, for such a bird, is not the same world you see. It is the same physical space, carrying an additional layer of information, an invisible geography of field lines, continuously visible, as present and readable as the angle of the sun or the shape of the landscape below. You move through that field every moment. It moves through you. You simply cannot see it. The robin on the winter hedge may, right now, be reading it. The invisible compass of the planet rendering itself visible in the corner of an eye the size of a pea. In the corner of geological time, the ground beneath you was once the bottom of a sea. Much of the limestone that forms the hills and cliffs of England, the karst towers of southern China, the white bluffs of Normandy, was made not by geology but by biology. It is composed almost entirely of the compressed shells and skeletons of marine organisms, foraminifera, coccolithophores, mollusks that lived in warm, shallow seas hundreds of millions of years ago, died, sank, accumulated in layers on the sea floor, and were slowly compressed into rock. The white cliffs of Dover are made of the bodies of creatures that lived and died before the dinosaurs appeared. The limestone pavement on a Yorkshire hillside was an ocean floor when the first fish were new. The chalk you can pick up on a beach in France holds, if you look at it under a microscope, the perfect preserved shells of organisms no larger than a grain of sand. The ground has a history. Every hill has a history. The particular hill you might be near tonight was once beneath water, was once populated by living things that are now the rock you walk on. The earth does not forget where it has been. It carries its past in its structure, legible to anyone patient enough to read it. Reading the world, after fresh snowfall, happens in a different kind of silence. Snow absorbs sound, not metaphorically, physically, measurably. Fresh snow is a porous medium, full of air spaces between the crystals, and those air spaces act as acoustic baffles. Sound waves entering the snowpack lose energy to the structure, converting from pressure waves into heat so small it cannot be felt. The effect at the surface is a reduction in ambient noise across a wide range of frequencies. The usual background of distant traffic, wind in dry leaves, the creak of branches, all of it drops in volume and in clarity. What remains sounds different, closer, somehow, more present. The auditory world contracts to what is immediate, and everything beyond that radius becomes muffled and indistinct. This is why a snowy morning sounds the way it does. Why there is a quality to the silence after snowfall that is different from ordinary quiet, more complete, more physical, as though the air itself had thickened into something that holds sound still. You have felt this. You may have felt it as peace, as calm, as a particular kind of morning that invites slowness. The snow was doing that to you deliberately, not deliberately, but physically, with the same indifference it applies to everything, giving you quiet not as a gift, but as a consequence of its structure. The effect is real. The peace it produces is real. The snow did not intend it. It happened anyway. Happening anyway, in the dark of certain caves, is one of the most patient forms of beauty the earth produces. In cave systems where water drips slowly through limestone ceilings, minerals dissolve into each solution and are deposited grain by grain, where each drop lands. Sometimes a grain of sand or a fragment of shell on the cave floor becomes the nucleus around which minerals begin to accumulate concentric rings building outward, slowly, in the dark, over thousands of years. The result is called a cave pearl, a perfect sphere, or near perfect, of layered calcite, sitting in a shallow pool on the cave floor, built by nothing more than the slow arithmetic of dripping water and dissolved mineral, repeated across millennia in complete darkness. No one sees them forming. No one is present for the accumulation. They simply grow in the quiet dark, following the physics of deposition and the chance of where a grain of sand happened to rest when the water found it. And then, eventually, someone with a lamp descends and finds them spheres of layered stone, smooth and luminous in the beam of a headlamp, sitting in their shallow pools as though they had been placed there deliberately. They were not placed. They simply became, in the dark, over time, through nothing but patience and the faithful repetition of water. Before electric light divided the night into before sleep and after sleep, humans rested differently. Historical records from across Europe, diaries, court documents, medical texts, references in literature going back to ancient Greece, describe what historians now call segmented or biphasic sleep. People would fall asleep shortly after dark, wake naturally in the middle of the night for an hour or two, and then sleep again until morning. The waking interval was not insomnia. It was expected, described, planned for. People used it to pray, to think, to talk quietly with a partner, to write, to simply lie still in the dark and let thoughts move through them without the pressure of the day. Researchers studying pre-industrial sleep patterns and modern participants placed in environments without artificial light tend to naturally return to this pattern within a few weeks. 2 sleeps, with a quiet interval between them, an hour of calm wakefulness in the deepest part of the night, when the world outside is completely still. That interval had a name in some languages. In Old French, it was called dorveil, a word that means something between sleeping and waking, a threshold state that is neither fully one nor the other. If you wake in the night and find yourself calm and unhurried, you may simply be doing what your body has always known how to do. What the body knows, the forest also knows and expresses in the speed of thought. The mycelium network beneath a forest floor transmits chemical signals between trees. This is established. But the speed of transmission is less widely known, and it is faster than it has any right to be, for something that has no neurons, no axons, no sodium channels, none of the machinery we associate with fast information transfer. In some studies, alarm signals in mycorrhizal networks have been measured traveling at rates comparable to signals in simple nervous systems. Not as fast as a human nerve impulse, but faster than the passive diffusion of chemicals through soil would allow. The mechanism is not fully understood. There may be electrical signaling involved, changes in ion concentrations across fungal membranes, propagating along the network. There may be hydraulic pressure waves. There may be something else we have not yet identified. What we know is that the forest, when one part of it is threatened, responds in other parts faster than the chemistry alone can explain. Something moves through the network. That is, functionally, a thought distributed, without a thinker, arising from the structure of the network itself. A thought that moves through trees, in the dark, beneath your feet right now. Right now, in the deep ocean, something enormous is slowly becoming a gift. A blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on Earth, reaching 30 meters in length and 150 tons in mass, dies somewhere in the open ocean, roughly once every few weeks across the world's oceans. The body begins to sink. It may take hours to reach the bottom, drifting down through layers of cold and pressure, passing through zones of darkness it never visited in life. When it arrives on the sea floor, the whale fall begins. Researchers who have observed whale falls, either by chance or by deliberately sinking dead whales with cameras attached, have catalogued dozens of species that appear within the first few days, drawn by chemical signals drifting upward through the water. Sleeper sharks, rat-tail fish, crustaceans. Then, as the soft tissue is consumed, polychaete worms arrive in enormous numbers, mats of them, covering the bones. Then the sulfophilic stage, which can last decades, a slow chemosynthetic community that has evolved specifically to live on whale bones. In ocean regions where nutrients are scarce, a single whale fall may be the most significant local event for an entire century, a point of abundance in an otherwise sparse landscape, a gift that keeps giving, in the dark, long after the giver is gone. Long after the giver is gone, the desert waits for something that may not come for years. In the driest inhabited region of the Atacama, local communities have developed techniques over centuries for harvesting water from fog. Nets strung across hillsides collect droplets from passing clouds, fog catchers, the technology called producing enough water from thin air to sustain gardens, livestock, communities. But the plants of the Atacama do not wait for nets. They have evolved their own fog-catching surfaces, waxy leaves, angled to funnel condensation toward the stem, fine hairs that collect droplets and channel them to the roots, surface structures that encourage droplets to coalesce rather than evaporate. The same physics that the baobab uses with its bark, the redwood with its needles water, gathered not from rain but from air, from what passes through rather than what falls directly. The Atacama plants have refined to an extreme. In a place where rain may fall once in a decade, the plants drink the mist. There is a particular kind of ingenuity in learning to receive what barely exists, in being built to catch what most things cannot hold. The fog is not enough for most living things. For the plants that have spent long enough learning its shape, it is enough. Enough, in the deep ocean, takes forms of bioluminescence beyond the gentle glow of a bay. Certain fish in the deep ocean do not simply glow passively. They communicate in light, actively, deliberately using it as a language, in an environment where all other forms of visual communication are impossible. The flashlight fish Anomalops catoptron carries beneath each eye a pouch filled with bioluminescent bacteria. The light is continuous, produced by the bacteria rather than the fish itself, and the fish controls it by rotating the pouch inward into a dark pocket of tissue or outward to flash, on and off, a controlled blink. Flashlight fish use this in coordinated group behaviors, flashing in patterns that appear to have social meaning, possibly coordinating movement, possibly recognizing individuals by their flash patterns possibly something we have not yet characterized. Lanternfish carry rows of light-producing organs along their flanks, species-specific patterns, like a constellation unique to each species, potentially allowing recognition in the dark. Some species migrate vertically each day, rising toward the surface at night, descending into darkness at dawn, their light patterns moving through the water column, like living constellations slowly rising and setting. In the dark ocean, light is language, and the ocean, it turns out, has been speaking in it for a very long time. For a very long time, the living world has been managing a chemistry that no single organism could manage alone. When lightning strikes, and it strikes the Earth roughly 100 times per second, 8 million times per day, the energy of the bolt is enormous enough to break apart the nitrogen molecules in the air. Nitrogen gas, N2, is held together by one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. Almost nothing in ordinary conditions can break it. Lightning can. The broken nitrogen atoms combine with oxygen in the superheated air around the bolt, forming nitrogen oxides. These dissolve in rainwater and fall to Earth as a dilute solution of nitric acid, which reacts with minerals in the soil to form nitrates. Nitrates are the form of nitrogen that plant roots can absorb. Every lightning storm is, among other things, a fertilization event. The sky is making nutrients and delivering them in the rain. Plants cannot use atmospheric nitrogen directly, no matter how much surrounds them. The 78% of the atmosphere that is nitrogen is chemically inaccessible to almost all living things. Lightning, and the bacteria that do a similar job more quietly in the soil, are the mechanisms that make the atmosphere's abundance available to the living world. The storm feeds the field. The lightning, terrifying and beautiful, is doing patient chemical work on behalf of everything that grows. Everything that grows eventually rests, and in that rest, something remarkable about the architecture of experience occurs. Before electric light reached human bedrooms, before the blue frequencies of screens began extending our perceived day long past sunset, humans, sleeping under natural light conditions, showed a pattern of melatonin release and body temperature change that researchers call the bimodal sleep architecture. The two-sleep pattern, with its quiet interval, described earlier, but something more subtle was also happening in that quiet interval. Brain activity during the dorvée, that threshold state between the two sleeps, showed patterns resembling neither sleep nor ordinary waking, something closer to what we now call the hypnagogic state, a quality of consciousness that is relaxed enough for unusual associations, for images and thoughts to arise without the editorial pressure of full wakefulness, but alert enough to hold them and move with them. Some historians believe this was a creative state, a time when problems were turned over in the mind not analytically, but associatively, when dreams from the first sleep were examined and continued, when the quiet of the night allowed a kind of thinking that the busy day did not permit. Your mind, in the hours between sleeping and sleeping, may be doing something it cannot do at any other time, not nothing, something specific and useful and ancient in the warm dark. In the warm dark of certain New Zealand caves, the ceiling does something that should belong to the sky. Waitomo and a handful of other cave systems in New Zealand are home to the larval form of a fungus gnat, Arachnocampa luminosa, that produces bioluminescent light from a specialized organ in its abdomen. The larvae, which can number in the thousands in a single cave chamber, build silken threads that hang from the ceiling, sticky with droplets to catch prey, and they glow. From below, looking up in a cave chamber where thousands of these larvae are present, the ceiling is covered with points of blue-green light. Still, arranged apparently at random across the dark stone above, they are indistinguishable from a clear night sky. Visitors are asked to move through these caves in silence and without flash photography, because noise and light cause the larvae to dim. In the quiet and the dark, the ceiling glows, a galaxy underground, made not of burning gas across unimaginable distances, but of larvae the size of a matchstick, glowing softly in a cave, each one attending to its own small life. The sky and the cave, briefly, looked the same. The distance between the cosmos and the creature turns out to be, sometimes, a matter of perspective. Perspective shifts what the body finds restful, and what the body finds restful shifts what perspective can reach. The roots of plants find their way downward not by accident, but by sensing gravity directly, in a mechanism of quiet elegance. In the root tip, in a region called the columella, there are specialized cells containing starch grains, heavy, dense particles called statoliths. When the root is oriented normally, the statoliths rest on the lower cell membranes. When the root is tilted, they shift, settling toward the new lowest point. The shift in position triggers a cascade of signals. The root cells on the lower side elongate more slowly. The cells on the upper side elongate more quickly. The root curves downward, correcting its direction, always moving toward the pull of the earth. Every root of every plant, in every soil on earth, is performing this same calculation, continuously measuring gravity with tiny particles of starch, translating the measurement into differential growth, curving toward the center of the planet with a faithfulness that never wavers. The root always knows which way is down, not by sight, not by learning, not by any faculty we recognize as knowing, but by the weight of a grain of starch in a cell, reliable as the planet itself. Even as you rest right now, in the ground beneath you, roots are feeling for down, as they always have, as they always will. Always, in the living world, something is finding its way through conditions that should make finding the way impossible. The tardigrade water bear, moss piglet, the animal with more names than most people have heard of, is less than a millimeter long. It lives in moss, in soil, in the film of water on a lichen-covered rock. It looks, under a microscope, like a tiny bear with 8 stubby legs, moving with a slow, ambling deliberateness that seems almost affectionate. And it is, by any reasonable measure, indestructible. When its environment dries out, the tardigrade enters a state called cryptobiosis. It pulls its legs inward, expels nearly all the water from its body, and becomes a desiccated barrel, a tun in which almost all biological activity ceases. Metabolism drops to 0.01% of normal. DNA repair continues, slowly. Everything else stops. In this state, it can survive temperatures from -272 degrees Celsius, 1 degree above absolute zero, to 150 degrees above. It can survive pressures 6 times greater than the deepest ocean trench. It has survived exposure to the vacuum and radiation of open space, in experiments conducted outside the International Space Station. It can remain in cryptobiosis for decades, possibly longer, and revive when water returns. The tardigrade does not know it is surviving anything extraordinary. It simply does what it does, in the moss, in the film of water, in the quiet corners of the world, on its own, unhurried schedule, and happens, as a consequence of its structure, to be essentially unkillable. Unkillable, in a different sense, is how the trembling giant of Utah has endured. Pando, the name means eye spread in Latin, is a grove of quaking aspen trees in the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah. From above, it looks like a forest. Individual trees, separate trunks, a canopy of round leaves that tremble in the faintest breeze, turning gold each autumn in a synchronized wave across the hillside. But underground, the trunks are not separate. They are all the same organism, a single root system, spreading across 43 hectares, sending up new trunks called ramets as the old ones age and die at the surface. The individual trees visible above ground live for perhaps 130 years. The root system beneath them has been continuously alive, expanding, regenerating for an estimated 80,000 years. 80,000 years. When Pando's root system was young, modern humans had not yet left Africa. The last ice age had not yet reached its peak. Woolly mammoths were alive in the forests around it. Every autumn, Pando's 40,000 trunks turn gold together, because they are one. Every spring they leaf out in the same week, because they share the same biology, the same root signals, the same ancient instructions rising from 80,000 years of accumulated survival. A forest that is one thing, a grove that is older than civilization, still spreading, quietly, in the mountain soil of Utah. From the soil of Utah to the center of the galaxy, the living world carries traces of the universe's own chemistry. Astronomers studying the molecular composition of interstellar space, the clouds of gas and dust between the stars, have detected complex organic molecules. Alcohols, aldehydes, amino acids, the chemical building blocks that on Earth participate in the processes of life. And in the dense molecular cloud at the galactic center, astronomers have detected ethyl formate, the molecule responsible for the flavor of raspberries and propyl cyanide. The detection of these molecules does not mean the galaxy smells of raspberries in any meaningful sense. Space is too cold, too sparse, too vast for human sensory categories to apply. But it means that the chemistry we associate with the living, with the edible, with the warmly familiar, that chemistry is not unique to Earth. It arises naturally from the same physics and the same atomic ingredients in the coldest and most remote regions of the universe. The molecules of flavor and of life do not require Earth to exist. They arise wherever the conditions allow, which suggests, quietly, that what arose here may not be as improbable as it sometimes seems, seen from inside this particular moment of it. Inside this particular moment, every storm is doing chemistry on behalf of the living world. Already, the lightning has been mentioned, its work of breaking nitrogen, delivering it to the soil in rain. But the storm does more than that, and does it with a consistency that the word weather does not quite capture. Lightning also produces ozone. The ultraviolet radiation of a storm generates ozone in the lower atmosphere. Where it is not the protective layer, it is in the stratosphere, but a reactive, short-lived molecule that acts as a disinfectant, breaking down organic compounds and bacteria in the air. The clean smell after a storm, that sharp, electric freshness, is partly ozone, partly petrichor, partly the simple absence of dust that the rain has washed from the air. And the rain itself, falling through the atmosphere, scavenges particles, dust, pollen, spores, pollutants, gathering them into droplets that fall to Earth, leaving the air above cleaner than it was before the storm began. Every storm cleans the atmosphere. Every storm delivers nitrogen. Every storm, in its noise and its drama, is performing a service to the chemistry of the living world that would otherwise have to be done some other way, more slowly, less completely. The thunder and the lightning are not interruptions to the quiet order of things. They are part of it. Loud, brief, necessary parts. Necessary, in the emotional life of elephants, takes a form that researchers approach carefully, aware of the weight of what they are observing. Elephants return to the bones of their dead. Not always, not in every circumstance, but with enough regularity and with enough distinctive behavior that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence or confusion. When a group of elephants encounters the remains of a deceased elephant, they stop, they approach slowly. They touch the bones with the sensitive tips of their trunks, feeling along the surface with a gentleness that those who study them describe carefully as deliberate. They sometimes pick up bones and carry them before setting them down again. If the bones are of a known individual, a family member, a matriarch, the behavior intensifies. The group may remain for an hour or more. Vocalizations drop to low rumbles. The interaction has a quality that, if observed in humans, we would call mourning without hesitation. We are rightly cautious about projecting human emotion onto other animals, but the caution works in both directions. We should also be cautious about assuming that the capacity to grieve, to return to what was lost, to touch it, to linger, belongs only to us. What the elephants are doing at the bones of their dead, we cannot name with certainty, but it is not nothing. It is not nothing that sea otters, in the cold kelp forests of the Pacific, seek each other out to sleep. Otters must stay near the surface to breathe, and they must sleep, and the currents of the open coast could carry them away from their habitat while they rest. To solve this, otters wrap themselves in kelp fronds, anchoring themselves to the forest while they sleep, the kelp holding them in place as the water moves beneath them, and they find each other. Pairs of otters, family groups, loosely associated individuals, they drift together in sleep, their bodies touching at the shoulder or the flipper. Sometimes, in the truest sense of the image, they hold hands, two otters floating on their backs, each wrapped in kelp, their forepaws resting in contact across the surface of the water. They do it so they do not drift apart. It is practical. It is also, in its image, something that requires no additional meaning to be affecting. Two small animals, in the cold water, holding on to each other so the current does not separate them. This happens every night in the kelp forests. While you sleep, somewhere on the Pacific coast, otters are doing this. The water is moving, the kelp is holding, and somewhere in the dark, small paws are resting against each other, resting against the pressure of deep time. The navigator turtle carries something almost beyond imagining. A female loggerhead sea turtle hatches on a beach in Florida. She scrambles to the water within minutes of breaking her shell, enters the surf, and disappears. She will not return to land for years. She crosses the Atlantic east, to the waters off Europe and Africa, and spends her juvenile years in the open ocean. Then she returns, crosses the Atlantic again, and eventually, as a mature adult, approaches the coast of Florida. Not the coast, the beach. The specific beach, or within a few kilometers of it, where she hatched a stretch of sand she has not touched in 30 years. She navigates by the magnetic signature of the beach, recorded in the first hours of her life. 30 years of open ocean, 2 Atlantic crossings, thousands of kilometers of routes that are featureless to any instrument that cannot read magnetic fields. And she arrives within kilometers of where she began. She nests. Her eggs hatch. The hatchlings scramble to the water, imprint the beach's magnetic signature in their first minutes of life, and begin their own 30-year journey. The information passing from generation to generation is not taught. It is carried in the body. The beach, in a sense, is never left behind. It travels with the turtle, written into her nervous system, waiting to be read when the time comes. When the time comes, in the long dark of the Antarctic winter, the rivers beneath the ice are still moving. The subglacial lakes of Antarctica, Lake Vostok, Lake Whillans, Lake Ellsworth, and over 400 others identified by radar imaging, are not static. They are connected. Water moves between them through subglacial rivers, flowing in the dark under kilometers of ice, driven by the subtle gradient of the rock below and the pressure variations in the ice above. Lake Vostok, the largest, has been isolated from the surface for an estimated 15 to 25 million years. It is roughly the size of Lake Ontario, liquid, in complete darkness, under 4 kilometers of ice, at a pressure 350 times that of the surface. When researchers drilled into it, an event of considerable scientific care and controversy, they found microbial life. Organisms that have been in that lake, in that darkness, since before our hominid ancestors existed, since before the ice age that now covers them began, evolving, slowly, in isolation, in a world that has not changed in any significant way for longer than the human line has existed. They are down there, right now, in the dark, under the ice, doing whatever they do, patient in a way that the word patient cannot quite reach. Cannot quite reach is how most human language lands when it approaches the truth of what you are. The hydrogen atoms in your body, the hydrogen in your water, in your proteins, in every molecule that participates in your biology, are approximately 13.8 billion years old. They were formed in the first 3 minutes after the Big Bang, in a universe too hot for anything more complex to exist, when protons and electrons first combined into the simplest atom. Those atoms have been part of stars. They have been part of nebulae. They have been part of oceans on early Earth, part of the first living cells, part of the long sequence of organisms that eventually produced, among other things, you. They have participated in every form of matter and energy this universe has explored in nearly 14 billion years of exploring. And tonight they are in you, organized into a pattern complex enough to be aware of itself, warm enough to need sleep, curious enough to wonder where it came from. The atoms are not yours. You are theirs, a temporary arrangement they have made, one of billions of arrangements they have made and will make, on a journey through time and form that began before time had the shape it has now. You are ancient beyond reckoning. You are, in the most literal sense, made of stars and resting on a planet that does its work quietly while you sleep. Even now, even in this moment of stillness, the decomposers are working. In the soil beneath any patch of fallen leaves, in the heartwood of a fallen log, in the thin film of moisture on a piece of bark, fungi and bacteria are dismantling what has died and returning it to what can grow again. A fallen leaf, oak or maple or birch, takes between 1 and 3 years to fully decompose in a temperate forest. In a tropical forest, the same process takes weeks. The rate varies with temperature, moisture, the community of decomposers present, but the direction is always the same, from complex organic structure to simpler compounds, from what was living to what will be living again, cycling through the soil and the roots and the leaves and the soil again. Without decomposition, the nutrients locked in dead tissue would stay locked. The forests would run out of the elements they need. Life would consume itself into stillness. The quiet, invisible work happening in the dark of the soil right now is not decay. It is renewal. It is the other half of growth, the part that happens out of sight, unhurried, continuous, asking nothing of anyone, simply doing what it has always done, turning the fallen into the foundation, again, every night, everywhere. Everywhere the moon pulls and the water answers. You are roughly 60% water, the same water that fills the oceans, that moves in tides, that rises in response to the moon's gravity on the side of the earth facing it, and the side facing away. That water is in you, in your cells, in your blood, in the fluid that cushions your brain and carries signals along your nerves. The moon that moves the oceans also, imperceptibly, moves you. Not enough to feel, not enough to measure with any instrument currently available, but the same force, applied to the same substance, following the same physics. The moon's gravity does not stop at the shoreline. It reaches through the ground, through the walls, through everything, to the water in every living thing. You are not separate from the tides. You are made of the same material the tides are made of, subject to the same forces, moving through the same gravitational field. When the tide rises on a beach somewhere tonight, something in you, too small to perceive, responds to the same pull. The moon does not know you are there, and it reaches you anyway. Reaches you in the last moment of day, if you are patient enough to wait for it. At the precise moment, the sun sets over an ocean horizon, or any flat horizon with clear air. The very last sliver of the sun's disk can briefly turn green. Not yellow-orange, not the red of a dramatic sunset green. A flash, lasting less than a second, sometimes two, visible only when the air is exceptionally clear and the horizon is sharp and flat. It is not a myth. It is not an optical illusion in the dismissive sense. It is a real optical phenomenon, the differential refraction of sunlight by the atmosphere. Different wavelengths of light bend by different amounts as they pass through the air at a low angle. Green light bends more than red or yellow, and at the precise moment the sun disappears, green is the last wavelength to clear the horizon. The green flash has been seen by sailors, by scientists, by poets who wrote about it long before physics explained it. Jules Verne wrote an entire novel around it, in which the flash, if seen, reveals the truth in others' eyes. The physics is simpler than the myth, but the experience, for those who have waited through a long sunset for a flash that lasts less than a second, is no less affecting for being explained. The day's last light is green. The atmosphere bends it into visibility for just a moment, and then it is gone. The last exhale of light. Then night, and what continues in it. Glowworm caves exist in New Zealand, in parts of Australia, in caves in Europe, places where the larva of a particular fungus gnat has learned to make light and use it to feed. But in the caves of Waitomo, the density and the stillness combine into something that visitors consistently struggle to describe adequately. The cave ceiling above the underground river is covered with thousands of larvae, each producing its continuous blue-green glow from a chemical reaction in its tail. The river moves slowly beneath. The larvae hang their sticky threads in silence, waiting for small insects to be drawn toward the light and caught. From the boats that move through the cave on the underground river, in complete silence, guides ask visitors not to speak. The vibration of voices causes the larvae to dim the ceiling above, is indistinguishable from the night sky on a clear night, far from any city. The same blue-white points of light, the same apparent depth, the same sense of something vast and still above you, indifferent to your presence, and magnificent regardless. Inside a cave, on an underground river, in a living ceiling made of larvae no larger than a matchstick, the sky reappears. The distance between the cosmos and the creature collapses into a darkness lit by living things, and for the duration of a slow boat ride on a quiet river, there is no meaningful difference between looking up at the stars and looking up at the cave. The cave holds its quiet, and in the canopy above the cave country, the trees hold theirs too, but not in silence. Under conditions of drought, stress, when water is scarce, and the vessels carrying water through the wood begin to cavitate, to develop tiny vacuum bubbles, as the water column stretches beyond what it can sustain, trees emit sounds. Ultrasonic clicks, too high for human ears, produced by the physical failure of those water columns under tension. Researchers have recorded these sounds by placing sensitive microphones against the bark of drought-stressed trees. The clicking is not random, it increases with drought severity, decreases when water is available, varies by species in predictable ways. A stressed forest, in other words, is making sounds that we cannot hear, a frequency of distress that moves through the wood of every affected tree, audible to instruments and, possibly, to other organisms sensitive to those frequencies, though we have not yet established whether neighboring plants detect and respond to ultrasonic stress signals specifically. The forest is not silent, even when it seems silent. It is speaking in registers above your hearing, in frequencies that your body passes through, without registering, in a conversation between trees and their own physiology that has been happening as long as trees have had wood. You are surrounded by sound you cannot hear. The world is louder than it appears, in directions your senses cannot reach. Cannot reach is where patience arrives, in the most literal geological sense. The Colorado River began carving the Grand Canyon approximately 5 to 6 million years ago. The canyon is now 446 kilometers long, in places 1 mile deep. Its walls expose rock layers spanning 2 billion years of Earth's history, nearly half the age of the planet, visible in cross-section, readable by anyone who knows the language of stone. The river did not intend to make the canyon. It simply moved downhill, following gravity, dissolving and abrading, and carrying away the rock in its path, 1 grain at a time, 1 flood at a time, 1 year at a time, for 5 million years. 5 million years of patient, unceasing movement, not hurrying, not pausing, simply continuing, at whatever rate the water and the rock allowed, in the direction gravity indicated. The result is one of the largest structures on the surface of this planet, carved not by force, but by persistence. Not by a single event, but by the accumulation of ordinary moments, each one unremarkable, together producing something that stops human speech. Whatever you are building, through whatever ordinary repetition of days you are doing something, the river also does. The scale is different. The principle is the same. The same principle, in trees, produces a different kind of record. When autumn arrives and leaves prepare to fall, something is happening inside the leaf that science has only recently begun to understand fully. The vivid reds, the anthocyanins, produced fresh by the tree as the leaf is sealed off, may be a signal. Not to us, though we receive it. To insects. The hypothesis, proposed by researchers studying co-evolutionary relationships between trees and aphids, is that the intensity of autumn red is a signal of chemical defense investment. A tree with vivid red leaves is advertising, to the aphids that overwinter on its bark, that it has heavily defended itself with tannins and other compounds. A tree with paler autumn color may be advertising lower defenses. Aphids, in some studies, preferentially choose pale-leafed trees to overwinter on. Whether this is the full explanation for autumn color is still debated. The science is genuinely open. But the possibility that the color of an autumn hillside is, in part, a conversation between trees and insects, a negotiation conducted in pigment, across the cooling air of October changes what a falling leaf means. It is not simply dying. It may be speaking, its last act a signal, sent to whatever is listening, in a color made for the purpose. Purpose, distributed without a center, without a plan, produces the murmuration and the colony and the reef. And in the high canopy of a South American rainforest, it produces something that moves. The walking palm Socratea exoryza grows multiple stilt roots that extend outward from the base of the trunk, touching the ground at points, sometimes a meter from the center. If one side of the canopy closes in, shading the palm, it grows new roots toward the light on the open side, and allows the roots on the shaded side to die and lift from the soil. Over years, the movement is measured in centimeters annually. The trunk shifts. The palm has moved, not walked, in the animal sense, but relocated, measurably, in the direction of better conditions, using the only mechanism available to it, the slow differential growth of roots, guided by light. It does not know it is moving. There is no experience of travel, no memory of where it was, and yet the tree, given enough time, finds its way toward what it needs. Something in that is worth holding. The idea that movement toward what sustains you does not require speed or decision or even awareness. That simply growing in the direction of what you need, slowly, without drama, across enough time, is itself a form of finding your way back, always, to where you began. The navigator turtle was the sea turtle, but this is the glowworm's light. This is the whalefall's century of giving. This is the tardigrade's ancient resilience. Everything that has been offered tonight has been a different angle on the same thing. That life, in its many forms, finds a way to continue. That the world is older and more patient than any of its parts. That you are made of the same materials, subject to the same forces, participating in the same long story whether you know it or not, whether you intend it or not, whether you are awake or asleep. The hydrogen in your body has been in stars. The iron in your blood was forged in supernovae. The water moving through you has been in clouds, in glaciers, in ancient sealed rock, in the ocean, in the cells of organisms that lived before complex life existed. It has been through the water cycle more times than there are words for cycles. You are not a visitor to this world. You are a temporary form. It has taken one of an uncountable number of forms, each one a way the universe has found to be, briefly, aware of itself. And right now, in this form, you are resting. And the universe is resting with you. You have been made from ancient light, and you are returning to quiet now. The last fact is not a fact. It is what was always underneath the facts. Beneath you, magma moves in the slow currents of the mantle, carrying heat from the planet's core toward the surface, the same process that has driven the movement of continents and the building of mountains for 4.5 billion years. It moves a few centimeters a year. It has moved this way since before the first living cell existed in the ocean above it. Around you, wherever you are, through walls, through windows, through the structure of everything Earth's magnetic field is present. It passes through you without resistance, the same field that guides the sea turtle home, that the robin sees as a compass in its eye, that deflects the solar wind and keeps the atmosphere from being stripped away. The field that makes this planet livable has been doing so for billions of years, and it is doing so right now, silently, while you rest. Above you, the atmosphere is held in place by gravity, a thin, fragile layer of gas that contains all the weather, all the oxygen, all the sound that has ever been heard, all the bird song, all the whale song, all the thunder, all the music. It extends about 100 kilometers upward, then gives way to space. 100 kilometers, in almost any direction across the ground. That would be a short drive. Upward, it is everything that makes life on this surface possible. And beyond the atmosphere, the stars are burning, as they have always burned, sending light in every direction, some of it toward this small planet, some of it arriving here tonight, some of it reaching eyes that are now closing. The world is not stopping while you sleep. The roots are feeling for down. The mycelium is moving signals through the dark. The tides are answering the moon. The glaciers are flowing their millimeter. Somewhere a wood frog is frozen and patient, waiting for spring. Somewhere a whale is singing into the deep water. Somewhere a murmuration is finding its shape in the last light. And somewhere a cave ceiling is glowing blue-green in the dark, indistinguishable from the sky. All of this continues. All of this has always continued. And you are part of it, not separate from it, not observing it from outside, but made of it, resting inside it, held by it, as you have always been held, even when you did not know it. Let the roots feel for down. Let the rivers move in the dark. Let the stars send their ancient light across the distances they have always crossed. You do not have to do anything now but rest. The world will still be extraordinary when you wake. It has been, without interruption, for 4.5 billion years. It will not stop tonight. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.